I love so many things about North Dakota, and one of the things I love the best is how anxious we are to help one another. You see it all the time. You've seen the traffic jams at entryways when you're trying to go into a restaurant or a building as people stop to hold the doors open for one another. If you've ever stopped alongside one of our roads to take a picture or a phone call or to change a tire, you've probably had multiple people stop just to make sure you don't need any help. Another way North Dakotans can show kindness to their neighbors is by getting vaccinated. Vaccinations keep vulnerable people safe from severe illness and death. They keep our economy running by keeping our businesses open. They help us stay mentally healthy by allowing us to connect with others through church events or community groups. They also keep our healthcare workers safe and on the job. Getting vaccinated is a choice you can make to help your neighbors, your community, and your state. So talk to your doctor about it and follow their advice to get the vaccinations that will help keep you and all the people you care about healthy and happy. To learn more, go to spreadlovenotcovidnd.org, a website set up by the North Dakota State University Center for Immunization Research and Education.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Welcome to Plain Talk, and abortion's been in the news. Well, it's been in the news for a while since the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, but it's been in North Dakota's news this week because we just had oral arguments before the state Supreme Court about the implementation of North Dakota's trigger ban on abortions, which was passed back during the 2007 session. It was introduced by a couple of Democratic lawmakers, passed with bipartisan majorities, and it was always set to trigger to go into effect should Roe v. Wade and other legal precedents at the federal level be overturned. Now, obviously, the proponents of abortion or proponents of access to abortion, I guess, they're wanting the law to be overturned. They're wanting the court to find in North Dakota's Constitution a right to an abortion that hasn't previously been established. As that is playing out in the courts, and currently the law is not in effect. It's been blocked by a district court judge named Judge Bruce Romanick. The law is currently on hold, and we don't know the status of it as yet. But we also have a legislative session coming up, and I have a feeling that during that session we are going to be dealing with some policy regarding the abortion law. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, well, if it goes into effect, it's already a near total ban. What else do we need? Well, there may be some tweaks that we need. So here to talk with me about that, as well as Chad Oban, who co-hosts with me on Wednesdays, although this is your last Wednesday.
Yeah, going out talking about abortion. What a great way to end this thing.
You know, it's I love talking about policy, but it's so emotionally fraught, and it's so, and understandably so. I'm not complaining about that. I understand why people feel so strongly about this issue. It's hard. It's a hard one to navigate sometimes. Anyway, here to join me is State Senator Janne Myrdal, who has done more work probably on this specific issue during her time in the legislature than just about any other lawmaker. Janne is a pro-life, has been involved in the pro-life movement for a long time, was a leader in that movement even before elected to the legislature. Now, certainly during her time in the state Senate, has pursued pro-life policies. Janne, welcome. Thanks for being on.
Hi, thanks, Rob, and hi, Chad. And aren't you happy to have me on your last day, Chad?
I mean, it literally is the dream, Senator.
I'm sure. Well, it's great to be on with you, and it's a good day to talk about life and talk about what happens next. Certainly, especially after the hearing in the Supreme Court yesterday. Well,
let's. That's what. By the way, this is what the show is all about, right? Bringing people together to talk. So let's talk, Senator. Irrespective of what the court does, let's assume that the court allows this law to go into effect. Does it need any changes, any tweaks in your mind?
Well, I think what's going on is let's back up a little bit, Rob. I think the pro-abortion industry and certain very few people in the medical field never thought that Roe was going to get overturned. So I think they're backpedaling really hard right now with fear-mongering and other things. But no, I've been working on it since June with a lot of other influences groups and attorneys and stuff. I've been working on a bill to sort of rewrite and clean up the North Dakota Abortion Act because we have to do it now. There are some conflicting language, things like that. I'm not going to give you my bill because that'll be in the bucket when we start session. But for me, yeah, there have to be some cleanup and some things that we can remove, because after Roe was removed, rightfully so, and given the states' rights back to the individual states and to the elected officials by the people that we saw in the last election, yeah, we have some cleanup to do. Absolutely.
Senator Myrdal, I think when we talk about abortion, both sides often frame this around the idea of, abortion on one side, terrible in any case, and another one, abortion on demand. But Rob and I have talked a lot that most people are somewhere in between those two places. I also think often when we talk about abortion, it's through the lens of somebody made a mistake, got pregnant, and now they're making this choice. And it's often not that simple, right? It's not that simple. So I'm going to take advantage of my time with you today, Senator Myrdal, and go through some real life scenarios with you and get your response to those things. As you can imagine, there's lots of rumors about what these bills are going to look like next session. I've heard up to 20 bills are going to come on abortion. One of the bills I've heard about is the idea of banning over-the-counter Plan B contraception. And, all these stories that I'm going to talk about are real life stories. So a college girl goes to a party. She gets raped after having too much to drink. The next morning, she takes Plan B to make sure that rapist's baby doesn't come to full term. Would you support or sponsor a bill that bans the use of Plan B contraceptive in the state of North Dakota?
Well, interesting that you brought that up, because I've been in this fight for 35 years, and I've been on the streets with the girls in the red light district. I've been in the gutter with horrible, horrible things. One of the things, Chad, that I'm going to tell you right off the bat is this. Women are a lot stronger than the pro-abortion lobbyists say we are. We've gone through reproductive, horrible stories for thousands of years, right? Maternal death, rape, incest, miscarriage, spontaneous abortions, you name it. And as a woman, you guys don't know what I've gone through, and I can't tell you what everybody I talk to have gone through. But reality is this, Plan B, number one, is not abortifacient most of the time if it's taken immediately. I'm not a physician, I'm not a pharmacist, so I would have to see what the bill says. But no, I have no intent of introducing or talking about any contraceptive bills ever. I've always said that. I think in the faith community, we vary widely on that. But anything that is abortifacient, I'm against. So Plan B is usually taken immediately after an event like that. I would certainly hope for me that young woman would immediately report that rape, so we get that bastard right away. That's one thing that's missing in this story of rape and incest, is that we need to make a culture so these young women or family members or whatever feel free and safe to report it immediately. Because I want those, like I said, bastards to get their punishment. I think it is one of the most horrific crimes that we have. So I think we can meet at the table on that, Chad. I really do. And I think we're seeing right now a backlog of 250 rape cases at our crime lab. I'm going to fight like crazy to make sure that doesn't happen. I actually talked to a young woman literally yesterday, who was raped in college a year ago, guys. And it has not been processed yet. So that's a whole different conversation for a different time, I think. But Chad, I think we probably easily consider the table on those issues.
Janne, one thing that, speaking about the specific abortion ban, one thing that I struggle with, because you made a point just a moment ago that we have to tweak this law because it's really going to be the law now. I think a lot of times, certainly in 2007, I wonder how many of the lawmakers who voted for that bill thought it would ever actually become law. I know for a long time, a lot of people believed that Roe would never be overturned. But now it's come to happen. And so now this law is actually going to be the law. It's not a theoretical exercise anymore. It's really going to happen. So talk to me about the exemption for rape, right? Because when I hear people talk about, well, I believe in banning abortion except for instances of rape, incest, life of the mother. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, how does that work as a matter of policy? For instance, the rape exception, that's in the law. We're going to have to enforce it. Does that need to be changed? Or if it doesn't, in your mind, how do we enforce it? Like, do we have to adjudicate a rape? Does the woman have to name the person who raped her? Does that person have to be found guilty? I don't know. How do we establish that a rape has occurred so that a legal abortion can occur?
Well, I tell you what, let's talk about what actually is real life in North Dakota. Over the last 10 years, Rob, first of all, incest and rape, yeah, they are reported. And the hospitals in North Dakota know that, and the doctors know that, right? So, but I have to say, in reality of life, in the last 10 years, there's been six abortions that have taken place in North Dakota hospitals because they report, right? We have a reporting system in North Dakota of any and all abortions. So only 6 abortions in 10 years. That is 0.04% of the abortions in North Dakota. So we're talking a minute, small number here. And every doctor that's out there, every physician that's out there deals with this, they know exactly what the law says. And there's no issue for them. The fear mongering that's going on with, oh my gosh, they're going to leave dead babies inside women and stuff. It is sad because back to what you said, in 2007, I was there lobbying. I disagree with you. We knew that Roe would be overturned someday. We knew that it was a erroneous law, that it took the states' rights away. We knew that it would come back someday. So I think those lawmakers didn't think of it as, oh, we're just going to please our constituents and put these laws in there. We sat till midnight sometimes and discussed these laws with lawmakers back then, and also further, I think it was 2011. So we knew this was going to happen. I think the abortion industry didn't believe it was going to happen, and now they're backpedaling and they're fear mongering, and we're seeing that in some of the articles from a particular doctor here in North Dakota. When reality on the ground is hospitals and the medical association, which I'm working with, and the doctors know exactly what the law says. They're not going to run away from North Dakota. Women are not going to walk around North Dakota with dead babies inside. As a matter of fact, Century Code is very clear on that. Chapter 12, that any of those things, ectopic pregnancy, spontaneous abortions, meaning the child is dead already, absolutely covered in the law. So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Senator Myrdal, I'm not sure I really heard an answer there in terms of what happens if a woman goes to and claims she was raped. I mean, so is it the doctor who has to make the determination? And what if it turns out that person is not convicted of rape? What happens to that doctor then? So the doctor makes the decision. The woman told me she was raped. It appears like she was raped, but then the rapist is never convicted. What happens then? Does the doctor get convicted? Or, I mean, I couldn't track what you were saying in that case.
Well, I think it's very clear that these things are reported, but it's also real life clear that most of these women that this happens to will, in the past, have gone to the abortion clinic. Now will go to Moorhead. It's a sad, horrible story, a sad, horrible thing that can happen. No, doctors are not going to be in trouble. We're talking about affirmative defense. I'm sure, Rob, you want to bring that up. You have to realize that's only in the first 6 weeks. And there's other states that have stricter affirmative defense and not exceptions than we do, including Ohio, I think, and another state, where there's been zero, none, never, ever a doctor that has had to go to court and been prosecuted. So I think we're nitpicking in something that will not happen. I can't imagine. I mean, I had a miscarriage. First time I've said that publicly. There was no pro-lifers outside that hospital room after I went through clearing that out, protesting, and no state's attorney is going to deal with that. Doctors know that. We know that. And the law specifically protects them from that. So again, Chad, I think this all is fear-mongering. It isn't happening and it won't happen. And the law protects these doctors.
When you say it isn't happening, Roe v. Wade's been, like it or not, was the law of the land for decades, going back to the 1970s, prior to the status quo. So how can we say it hasn't been happening? We just got a new regime where these abortion bans could take effect, and in many cases, I mean, not many of them have, because there's been subsequent, like in our state, has been subsequent litigation that's held them up from taking effect. So when you say it can't happen and it hasn't been happening, well, Roe's been in effect for all these years, hasn't it?
Yeah, but there's still been restrictions in every state on abortion, right? So that's been going on for 50 years. Actually, this last week it was 50 years since Roe was decided. So let's look at what is it in the law currently that one doctor specifically and the abortion industry and their attorneys are worried about. It's affirmative action, right? That's what they're concerned about.
Affirmative defense, I think.
Sorry. See, there you go. Affirmative defense, right? You have to realize that that's not the criminal part. Let me I wrote a note down here that says, in practice, that's only the first 6 weeks. After that, it's exceptions, right? And we are looking at that affirmative defense thing now. And I think the lawmakers this session absolutely is going to look at that. And I can't tell you what they're going to vote or not vote. Likely, it could be removed. But if you look at it too, I talked to attorneys all across the nation and here in North Dakota that says, hey, my doctor, I talked to him. He wants the option of affirmative defense. He wants the option of being able to go to court and say, it was the life of the woman. I did. And here's the fact. And it's just a factual thing. It's not actually the criminal conviction that comes from affirmative defense. It's actually the how do I explain that without, I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to say it wrong, but it's the giving the information out that clearly says, this is why I did it. And this is the evidence that I did it. So is it likely that we're going to have doctors hauled in to court in North Dakota or any other state, Rob? I don't see it that way. And I think the lawmakers wrote a very perfunctory, clear law, and other states have followed our suit on both these laws. I think North Dakota were the breaking ground for a lot of these laws, including some of the language in Dobbs, by the way.
I just one follow up. You're a conservative like I am, and I am. Yep. I pride myself on being skeptical of government power. And what I'm worried though is with this law, we're creating a situation where doctors are only not going to be prosecuted in the way that I think nobody in this discussion want to see doctors prosecuted. But it seems like we're creating a situation where the only guarantee we have that that's not going to happen is the forbearance of the people enforcing the law. Like, we have to trust that prosecutors aren't going to go after these doctors because I don't know. I mean, to me, I don't. That's not how it should work. As a conservative, I don't want to just trust that government officials aren't going to abuse their power. Does that concern you at all?
I fully understand that, but I don't think there's room for that in the law. If you go through it, there isn't room for that. Again, the affirmative defense thing had nothing to do with a conviction. It's just the presenting of evidence. And so whether we keep that in there or not, that is purely, like you said, next session, we have to deal with that. And to Chad's point a little earlier, he mentioned there's maybe up to 20 bills coming. I'm the leader of the pro-life caucus in the legislature, and I've not heard any of those bills coming. I can't control that they don't come. We know there's people, we can name people that have brought bills before. I can't control that. They're elected by their constituents. But I think we want to coalesce around this cleanup bill of the Abortion Act. But I'm not going to kowtow to the fear-mongering of the abortion industry either. I mean, yesterday the attorney literally said that women are going to live in torture on the streets. She literally said that. Women in North Dakota are going to go through torture on the streets of North Dakota. I mean, come on. It's fear-mongering. That's all they have left. They have nothing else left. And so they're going to nitpick things that lawmakers elected by the people in North Dakota have written and continue to stand by. And I think this legislator coming up is going to continue to stand by the laws that we have on the books, assured that these are good laws. Affirmative defense, we'll see where that ends up.
Senator Myrdal, I think one of the things also that's difficult about this conversation is there's often a casting of stones to people who disagree with us by using language like pro-abortion, abortion industry, those kind of things. And I'm not suggesting the left doesn't do the same thing, but I think those are the things, that kind of language is why we can't have conversations about these kind of things in a good way. So I wanted to call that out. And then I want to get into a question. Again, I talked about real life scenarios. My wife and I have friends who for many years tried to have a baby. They got pregnant about 4 months in. It was determined that the baby was not going to live. And essentially a very painful birth, and the baby wasn't going to live. And so she had two options, terminate the pregnancy or bring the baby to term knowing that it wasn't going to live, and go through the mental anguish of people saying, aren't you so excited about the baby? Was the room put together? All those kind of things. And so they made the determination between their God, their doctor, and them to go to Minnesota because it was past the form. I don't know exactly the timeline. And as they walked in, there was pro-life people there screaming at them to save their baby, keep their baby. And the thing that she wanted more than anything was to keep the baby. Thank God they now have a baby and a second child on the way. But one of the other bills I've heard about is the idea of prosecuting parents or people who go across state lines to get these kind of things. Is that a bill that you would support or sponsor during the upcoming session?
Absolutely, Chad, not. Absolutely not. And there is no such bills coming that I know of. Again, I mean, I have to go back at you a little bit here since we're having a conversation. You say I use the pro-abort and stuff. You just said pro-lifers were screaming. So I think we both do the same thing.
You described yourself as a pro-lifer. I'm using your same language.
I know, but they were screaming.
Okay.
I've never seen them do that. I mean, there's always actors that are doing crazy things, but no, nobody's going to stand on the North Dakota border and arrest anybody who had a abortion in Moorhead. I've said it to pro-lifers, Chad, that my kid went north to Canada when he was 18, right? In the weekend with a bunch of friends, and they had beers. I probably shouldn't say that publicly, but I don't think Border Patrol arrested them coming back. So same when I took my kids home to Norway, 18, you can have a beer with grandpa. Nobody was going to arrest them. So of course not.
Well, I think also as conservative, we believe in states' rights. So Minnesota, I mean, to me, that's why I liked the Dobbs decision. Is it gave the pro-life movement a chance to win, but it also gave the pro-life movement a chance to lose. And the pro-life movement's going to lose in some of these states, right? I mean, some of these states are going to decide, and already has in places like Kansas and Kentucky. There's going to be a lot. We're gonna find, I think, an equilibrium, and I'm glad, frankly, that Dobbs has made that possible. But it's gonna take a lot of tough debates along the way. What does, and I know you said you didn't want to give your bill away, and obviously that's what I was hoping for, is that we could break some news today. But I mean, I'm just curious, because in my mind, I mean, what does a good abortion law look like to you in North Dakota? Like we're talking about tweaks and everything. If you could just be Queen Yana for a day and just write the law, what would that look like?
Well, I tell you what, the laws that we have on the books, I'm going to defend them vigorously in the legislative session because I think they're good. I think they're some of the leading things in the nation. We have the trigger bill. We also have the heartbeat bill, which most people don't talk about, which now, sadly, Hovland, quote unquote, didn't have time to consider. So that's going to go back to 8 seconds.
That's just so our listeners understand, the heartbeat bill it's a ban basically once a heartbeat's detected. I think
Correct.
That's around 6 weeks generally. Yeah. It's been basically enjoined in the federal court system for a long time, and it was kind of a dead issue because Roe was still in place. Now that Roe's been overturned, that's another law that the state of North Dakota is trying to bring back. And the most recent action, as you mentioned, federal judge Daniel Hovland declining to do so upon the request of Attorney General Drew Wrigley. Anyway, just wanted to clear that up.
And that, thank you for that. And that will be appealed to the 8th Circuit Court. And by the way, back in, I'm such a geek that I actually read the 8th Circuit Court decision back in, I think it was 13 or 14, where they said, North Dakota really, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, so don't take this as legal advice, but they basically said, no, we can't let that stand. We have to enjoin it. However, and then they turned to the Supreme Court and said, you need to lift Roe because we should be able to do that as a state. And back to the states' rights issue, the other thing that is important too, and if I'm queen today, I would love to see a state where we have services and help so abortion would become unthinkable. And I think one of the faults of the other side, and I'm going to call them pro-abortion because that's what they are, is that they're unwilling to talk about what actually is an abortion. What is a dismemberment? What is it? What does it actually do? Let's have a video and show people what it does. They run away from that. So, but I would love to see more alternatives to abortion programs. So we have bills coming up on that, expanding that vastly. Anything from, why is there taxes on tax-free adult diapers, but not tax-free diapers for kids? We are expanding that quite. So there's about 3 or 4 bills coming on that to expand all kinds of services to women and children and families, because we are called pro-birthers many times by the other side, but that's not true. We have 6 or 7 crisis centers around the state that does excellent work. The other thing I would love to see is, let's sit down at the table. I've tried that for 35 years to sit at the table with Planned Parenthood and others. And let's do it. Let's ban abortion except rape and incest. And they run to the hills. They have never, ever, ever sat at the table with us for any of that. So they don't care. And they're not pro-woman. So that is sad to me that we have these divisions that are so strong. And then we actually aren't willing to actually talk about the damage to women and the horrific thing that an abortion does. We're not willing to see it. We're not willing to look at it. And I think that's a big gap in this discussion.
So I think the best way to avoid abortions is to avoid unwanted pregnancies. I think that's the best way to avoid that. It's pretty clear that one of the best ways to avoid unwanted pregnancy is sex education in our schools. Abstinence-only education doesn't work. What would you support comprehensive science-based sex ed in all of our schools to limit the amount of unwanted pregnancies moving forward?
I tell you what, don't we already have that? I mean, we already do that, and sadly, we don't do enough abstinence. And I don't know what the science is that says the abstinence teaching doesn't work. No, I'm not ignorant. I know that our children fail. We all fail. We all have come short of the highest standards in our lives, and that's a broken world. But I also do think, I tell parents all the time, if your child stays abstinent, who makes money on them? No one. If they're sexually active, whole different story. The contraceptive industry certainly, sadly for young women, there's 47 sexually transmitted diseases now. Pregnancy isn't the greatest risk in illicit sex. It's health issues. It's damage to women that they can't have children again. It is the abortion industry makes money. So let's have a real conversation about what abstinence is. Wouldn't you set the highest standard for your children? Years ago, a young man came to me and said, well, at least I got my 14-year-old girl on a pill. And I said, well, congratulations. You just protected yourself from a child, but not from all the damage that can happen to your girl. Why do we believe, Chad, that our children, young as 12, 13, 14, and I've counseled them many times, are just sexual animals that they can't say no? Well, I think we need to set the standard to say no. We need to set the standards to say no, and then we'll deal with it when it happens. But just to say that science says that spreading the birth control pill or patches or other things out to our young children is the best thing, I disagree.
I don't think that anyone on this call was suggesting that 12-year-olds are sexual animals that can't stop themselves from having sex.
But our society does.
I think it's naive to think that teenagers aren't going to have sex, and if mom and dad just says don't have sex, they're going to do it. I was a teenager once. If my mom and dad told me not to do something, I'm not sure that was the best messenger to get me to do something.
I was probably more likely to do it if they told me, but that was me. I was a real a-hole as a kid. Maybe not much has changed. I don't know.
Confession time.
But one thing, Janne, I just because you were very involved, and I know we have just a few minutes left here. You were very involved with the political fight over NDSU. They had a program that they were running in partnership, I think, with Planned Parenthood, and it was about basically researching exactly what we're talking about, which was sex education in schools and what sort of sex education would work the best. And I got to say, I'm kind of in Chad's group. I think it's a little naive to believe that you could just tell teenagers not to have sex and they're not going to do it. They're going to do it. I think it behooves them to understand how it works, what the risk. Because I agree with you. I mean, sex is risky not just because of unwanted pregnancy. Sex is risky because of things like disease and other things. So, I mean, I agree with that. I guess I just struggle. Why would we not want to impart that knowledge to students that syphilis and gonorrhea and these things, these are real things that can happen to you. Sex is something that you have to be responsible with and you have to make responsible decisions about. I don't understand why that's a bad message.
No, I don't think this is a time to discuss that whole issue, frankly, but different faith groups believe differently on that issue, but we already teach that in our schools. It is comprehensive sex education in every one of our schools. Quickly back to Planned Parenthood and NDSU. What was happening there is they were funneling federal money through a state-funded institution to Planned Parenthood, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota. So they said it was for research for children at risk, which is what Planned Parenthood does. They put children at risk. So it was illegal to do. You can't do that through a state institution. And so it's kind of like putting the fox in a hen house. You really want Planned Parenthood, who is the largest abortion industry in the nation, to teach sex ed? That's like fox in a hen house to me. So that issue was a whole different thing, had nothing to do with contraceptives whatsoever. And I'm glad that NDSU and the governor and everybody decided this was enough for that organization. So, but having said that, I don't think we're naive to the fact. I just think that we need to return to trusting and believing in our children and put that standard first. If not, I think it's individually up to people. But if it's abortifacient birth control, I'm 100% against it. And there are some that are, and some that are not. So, but I'm not going to get into a bill about whether the state should buy contraceptives or give out contraceptives or should ban contraceptives. I have no interest in that whatsoever.
So we're running short on time, so I'm going to combine two questions into one that might not be all that connected. So work with me here. As you know, we talked about it before we went on air. My wife and I adopted a wonderful son who's 6 years old. And I will tell you, people generally don't just start with adoption. I mean, there's lots of stuff that leads up to adoption.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the normal case. So I want to talk about adoption, and I want to talk about in vitro fertilization. One of the other things sort of being talked about is the idea of banning storage for IVF. I just saw online a former teacher of the year and her pastor husband, who have a beautiful child through IVF, are going in with those stored eggs to try to have another child. So my two-part question is, one, would you support or sponsor a bill that would eliminate the ability to store embryos for in vitro fertilization? And have you or will you do anything to incentivize or encourage adoption in the state? As you probably know, adoption is financially very, very difficult. It's some unique circumstances, but I mean, $50,000 out of pocket to make sure birth mom is okay. And then the other part of that is birth mom giving up a baby that she's had for, that she's grown inside of her. People talk about it like it's just like, oh, so many people want to adopt babies. Just put your child up for adoption. And that's just such an easy thing. This was a big deal for this mom that made this really, really brave decision. And she's struggling with trauma afterwards because of it. So two-part question, IVF, where are you at on that? And then is there ways that the state can incentivize adoption in a financial way and other kind of things to provide services for people involved in that?
Absolutely. Excellent questions, Chad. And thank you for adopting that beautiful boy. I worked with adoption in Texas for many, many years. And I've been there at that hospital bed and taken that baby away from the girls and stayed in touch with them. So you and I could sit and have coffee and talk about that. It's the most loving, precious, self-sacrificing thing a young woman can do. And she carries it through her whole life, and thank you for taking that child. And I'm grateful she gave it life. So we're actually working on several bills. Our interim committee, judiciary, looked into the cost of adoption last time. Your wife was there and testified. We are looking into maybe doing some incentives or some tax breaks or whatever for all those home studies and all the, that how invasive they are and how expensive they are. So we're looking at that. Actually, there's some bills coming on that. So I'm totally with you. And if you want to come and testify, I'd be thrilled to.
One of the things that frankly is most expensive is also helping the birth mom, with prenatal, making sure housing and meals and all those kind of things, particularly with birth moms that are in poverty. And that ends up being really expensive for adoptive parents as well.
Well, let's work on that going forward. I'm totally with you. As far as IVF goes, I have no interest in any bills coming forward on that. I haven't heard any bills coming forward on that. As a matter of fact, you probably all saw frozen embryos for 30 years, just gave twins to a couple this last week. I have a friend in Washington State that does something called snowflakes, where she got into that. And she actually has an adoption agency for frozen embryos, and she's done it for the last 20 years. It's absolutely beautiful and precious. So that again proves life is life. You might freeze it for 30 years, but it's still life when it's an embryo.
Well, Janne, I think we'll stop there. I asked for 30 minutes. You gave us like 32 minutes. So we went a little over.
I'm going to charge you for that. I'm going to charge you for the 2 minutes.
Okay.
I assure you, he does not pay for people's time.
Shoot!
I do not.
It wouldn't go over with the ethics committee either, right?
No, that would be unethical, Senator. All right, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on, Janne.
Hi there, my name is James Wallner. I produce and host the podcast Dakota Spotlight, a true crime podcast that tackles historical and unsolved crimes in the upper Midwest. Follow along with me as we search for a missing girl, attempt to solve a 45-year-old murder, and much, much more. That's Dakota Spotlight Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at inforum.com/podcasts.
Well, Chad, I thought that conversation went very well. We started out talking about how difficult a topic that is. One of the things I've really enjoyed about this podcast, that if I could toot our own horn, I think we've done a really good job of navigating those conversations with people and hopefully leading to something that's illuminating for the people who listen to it. Janne, you like her position or not, she's a leader in this policy area in our state. And I frankly find that was illuminating. You asked her about a lot of potential, now that Roe v. Wade's gone, a lot of potential policies that a lot of people might find objectionable. We got her on the record about that. I thought it was a good conversation.
Yeah, I think it's, when I think about the last year of being on this podcast, the fact that I spent 30 minutes talking to Senator Myrdal and 30 minutes talking to Representative Hoverson about things that we just disagree with wholeheartedly. It really is interesting. And I think even on that, I could not disagree with Senator Myrdal more on most things. But when we talk about adoption, when we talk about some of those things, there is often common ground between the right and left on things. And so often it's harder to demonize each other when you know each other. Although if she said pro-abortion one more time, I was thinking about coming through the screen.
Yeah.
But it is like when you're talking to each other, it is a little bit, it's more difficult to attack each other and be negative. So this has served a great purpose for that. It's
tough. Although, I mean, when you were talking about the pro-life people outside, and again, any protest movement can have nutters, but, sometimes pro-lifers are painted, in popular culture as being these sort of dopey, hateful people. And I know a lot of them and they're not. I mean, most of them that I know are not. Now, obviously within any movement there's some cranks, but
like I said, I thought that was fair that using the language yelling at them or whatever I said probably wasn't accurate, but
sure
certainly people saying that to them.
Well, let's move on. You mentioned that I've been writing a lot of columns about Trump lately, and it's hard not to. I mean, we just came through a midterm in which arguably Trump's influence, right, the mega world. I saw somebody refer to it as the mega cinematic universe, which I think is probably accurate. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think cost Republicans a midterm election. I think, but for a lot of these crazier Trump-aligned candidates, Republicans probably would have taken the Senate and probably would have a larger majority than they're going to have in the United States House of Representatives. Trump has cost the party a lot. And then you come into the dinner party that he just had with Kanye West and Nick Fuentes, which if you don't know who that is, Google him. But he's a Nazi. He's a tiki torch bearing Nazi. And Trump just had a dinner with him and has since subsequently, tried to do some damage control but within that damage control, still has not condemned either Kanye West, whose anti-Semitism at this point, his stuff about Jews controlling, the media and the entertainment industry and everything, ugly, hateful stuff, or Nick Fuentes. I mean, just has not. He said, well, I didn't know who Nick was, which I'm sorry, he still has Secret Service protection, and they vet everybody who comes in. You're telling me nobody told the president who this person was? Give me a break. I don't buy it. But even so, still has not specifically condemned Holocaust denial as one example. So, I mean, I guess people have been reading my columns, and I mean, I'm frustrated because this is embarrassing. I mean, like it or not, I mean, you could say all you want about, Republicanism isn't the same as conservatism. Well, okay, but in the public's imagination, the Republican Party is the conservative party. Right? And who is the ostensible leader of the Republican Party today? Donald Trump. He is speaking for all of us. He is representing all of us on the conservative side or the Republican side of things. And it's embarrassing. And I guess that's the thing that I've been trying to communicate. I am frustrated with this situation. And Republicans, it's not enough to just try to let Trump fade away because A, I don't think he's going to. And B, I'm sorry, when somebody crosses this line, you have to do more than that. You can't just say, well, that was a bad idea and move on with your life. You have to admit that you made a mistake in backing Donald Trump.
So I think MAGA and Trumpism has proven to be a losing strategy for the Republican Party for 3 straight elections now. I saw Joe Scarborough this morning, who, by the way, I can't stand. He's nauseating, talking about, the Republican Party. It's sort of like they're bringing their car to a place to fix it, and they keep breaking the car and making it worse, but they keep coming back to the same place and breaking it. That's what Trumpism is for the Republican Party. The problem that Republicans have is Trump represents a big part of people who identify as Republicans right now. I would suggest Mr. Fuentes might represent a chunk of the Republic. I mean, this guy's got a following. I just watched a clip yesterday. I wasn't that familiar with this guy, but I've watched some clips since the dinner. I mean, I watched 30 seconds of him using the N-word and calling people...
He's described Jews as cookies because they're baked in an oven. And it disgusts me to say that, but I want people to understand who this guy is. He refers to Jewish people as cookies, and it's a joke based on the Holocaust.
And he's a young guy, right? He's 24 years old.
Yeah, he first
exactly what he wants from this dinner. There's a lot more people who know who this guy is today than they did a week ago because he met with the former president and Kanye. Which, come on, Kanye.
Which by the way, I mean, mega world superstars like Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene have spoken at events hosted by Nick Fuentes and his group. And I think to your point, and it pains me to admit this, but you're not wrong that Nick Fuentes and that sort of anti-Semitic like that, it represents a large enough faction of the conservative or the MAGA movement or the Republican movement, whatever you want. It's a large enough that Trump is afraid of alienating them. Yep. Trump feels like he needs them to win.
And I think, you're absolutely right. The Republicans and the Republican Party can't just wait for Trump to go away. They need to proactively denounce this kind of stuff, because we've seen this before when Trump does something that's sort of out of the mainstream, and then he backpedals, and then Republicans are like, well, he's I mean, we saw it after January 6th. He's terrible. We need to impeach him. And then, then they're back in bed with the guy. I mean, Kevin McCarthy was down in Mar-a-Lago days after January 6th. So I think that we need traditional Republicans like Kelly Armstrong, Kevin Cramer, John Hoeven, Doug Burgum. Don't wait for a reporter to ask you what you think of this. Proactively put out a statement saying President Trump should not be playing footsies with Nazis and anti-Semitic and racist people like this Fuentes character or, Kanye. I mean, it's not good for the country.
But again, getting back to your point, everybody's afraid of making the base angry, right? Everybody's afraid. Donald Trump, despite all of this, despite January 6th, despite this meeting, despite all the other horrible things he does, still commands the loyalty of a very large cross-section of the GOP base, and everybody's afraid. So that speaks to, yes, it's a Trump problem, but it's also a base problem, because it seems to be nothing that Trump can do. I'll tell you, in my most recent column this week, I wrote that the Trump's, I think the headline was something that Trump, it's not enough for them to just turn their backs on him. They have to actively oppose him. And I got a bunch of Facebook comments, as you can imagine, and one of them was from a gentleman by the name of Damian Johnston. He's the son of Dan Johnston, former state lawmaker, ran for treasurer with the endorsement of Mike Lindell and Donald Trump, very much a mega world. He was one of the young Republicans in that group that I broke the story where they were, using white supremacist tropes and advocating anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and everything. Now, Mr. Johnson wasn't writing those things himself, but he was certainly posting in there and wasn't objecting to any of it. He comes out there, and his first response is, Rob, why are you being so divisive? And I'm thinking to myself, well, because I want to divide Republican and conservatism from Holocaust deniers, right? That to me is its sort of divisiveness that is acceptable. You morons go over there. I'm dividing myself from you. I don't want myself or any movement that I belong to be associated with you. But that was the response, Chad, from a lot of people was, and there was this other thing, in Vice President Mike Pence, who I give a lot of credit to, but, one of the things he said is he came out and he said that Donald Trump should apologize for it. But then he also said, but I don't believe Donald Trump's a racist or an anti-Semite. Well, okay, but there comes a point where if you're willing, maybe you don't personally have any animosity against black people or Jewish people, but you're willing to make common cause with or to at least exploit the support of people who do, that kind of seems like racism, right? Maybe a less virulent strain, although I have a hard time with talking about degrees of bigotry. Like, once you get past a certain point, you're just a bigot. And so I don't know. I don't buy that Donald Trump's not a racist. Not when he's willing to sit down with Nick Fuentes, and not when he's willing to refuse to condemn, anything that Nick Fuentes is saying. Like, I don't know. That seems like bigotry to me.
And again, I want to just emphasize, this guy isn't just even like your uncle who says an inappropriate comment at Thanksgiving dinner.
It's not some 90-year-old person who's using a term in a way that falls poorly on modern ears, right?
This guy knows exactly what he's doing. He wouldn't say it unless he believes it. To your point, though, that people are afraid of the base, is it worth it? I mean, and maybe it is. Maybe you need traditional Republicans who get elected based on what these folks do. But I get tired of, and it happens here in North Dakota as well, people who, get so frustrated with the Bastiats, but then at the same time help elect them or help prop up or fund sort of the activities that are going on. I mean, it's a total reap what you sow sort of thing. And if you're not willing to stand up to these folks in public ways, this is what you're going to get. And I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, going to a convention and seeing traditional Republicans rubbing elbows with people like Luke Simons and others. And it's like, I know what you guys say about these Bastiat folks when they're not around, or when the microphone is off, or in private rooms, that you wish they wouldn't get elected and all those other kind of things. But you're empowering them. So anyway, I would just love to see some traditional folks. And McConnell was really, he ended up being pretty strong against Trump on this. I mean, basically saying somebody who has dinner with somebody like Fuentes is not going to get elected president moving forward. What does that mean in 6 months? We'll see.
Yeah, well, that's always been the problem, to your point. I mean, McConnell condemned Donald Trump after January 6th, but then, everything always just seems to die down.
But Rob, what's the alternative? DeSantis? I mean, who is going to want to put themselves out there against Trump and absolutely just get demolished? I mean, he has no, he's going to do whatever it takes.
The only thing is that's why I'll be honest. Out of the midterms, I wanted a divided government. All right, I wanted Trump to have cost Republicans the Senate, but not have cost Republicans enough where they could have the House. Right. So, and this is my calculation. Call it cynical or whatever, but I was hoping Republicans could have the House to roadblocks that Democrats didn't have a majority to push through a lot of policies that I don't like, but that Republicans lost enough so that we could say Trump's a loser, because he is. And I think that's probably the most damaging thing to happen to Donald Trump is what happened in the midterms. And I think that's the thing that Republicans have to push on. This, to your point, one election cycle after another, Donald Trump is losing. Yeah, he won narrowly in 2016 without the popular vote on the Electoral College.
Well, getting 6 million less votes or whatever.
Right, but since then they lost in the 2018 midterms. They lost in the 2020 midterms. They've now lost in the 2022 midterms, or at least underperformed. Now I should say that in two of those cycles, Republicans did make up ground on the House.
Yep, underperformed is the right word.
Underperformed, I think, is probably the better word. Republicans probably could have taken back Congress a while ago. Maybe
should have taken back the Senate this time.
They definitely should have been in control this time. And Trump is the problem. Trump is the problem, and you're going to have to let him go. But I don't know how because again, I write about this stuff all the time, Chad. And you should see the emails that I get. You should see the tweets that I get. You should see the Facebook comments. A lot of that's public. People can go look at it if they want. And it's just absolute 100% Trump loyalists who, and even the ones who are embarrassed enough where they're not going to specifically defend Trump, try to do this thing. Well, why aren't you writing about this stuff that Democrats are doing? And it's like, well, the stuff that Democrats are doing is also important. But what can Republicans do about that if we're still saddled with Trump? Right? It's like our movement has to be something better than it is first, and not just so that I could feel morally good about it, right? But also so that it can be effective in advancing a conservative platform.
But again, I asked the question, who's the alternative? Who's going to step up? I mean, because Trump's still the likely nominee at this point. I would say he's the favorite. I mean, he's a former president, even with all the baggage. We've talked about the base and the people who are going to come up, primaries and all that other stuff. There's a lot of Republicans who want to be president. I don't know that there's a lot of Republicans who want to deal with running against Donald Trump in a primary. You see the clips of Trump voters saying they hate Ted Cruz, they hate, DeSantis, they hate these people because they're not far enough right.
I think DeSantis has a shot, right? I mean, DeSantis is probably the one, and I'm not saying that as saying he can. I mean, I think he could beat Trump, but nothing's guaranteed. To your point,
but Rob, if you're Ron DeSantis and you're relatively young, don't you just wait until Trump is out of the way?
Trump's old. Part of what's not helping, by the way, is Democrats sticking to their guns with Joe Biden. Joe Biden on the ballot, if Democrats were to come along and suddenly a younger, more energetic, I dare I say more competent candidate stepped forward for Democrats, that would change the trajectory on Trump. But if it's Biden again, I think the Trumpies are going to think they can beat Biden.
Yeah, and I also think 2022 really solidified Biden running again and Biden being the nomination or getting the nomination. If Democrats would have got killed, they would have lost 40 seats, would have lost the Senate. I think there would have been a lot of pressure for Biden to not run again. But I mean, what's the case right now for Biden not to run again? Other than his age. I mean, we're seeing a new generation of leadership in the House, which is a good thing, I think, for Democrats. I think at some point there'll have to be a new generation of leadership in the Senate. But at some point, Democrats' bench can't be Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. I really, really like Pete Buttigieg, and I think at some point has a future. I don't know if America's ready for a gay president with two kids with his husband, but at some point there has to be a generational shift at the leadership of the Democratic Party that started in the House, and we'll see what happens in the Senate and the presidency moving forward. But to your point, Biden versus Trump, I really like Uncle Joe, as he's known at our house, but I don't know that I can go through another one like that. I mean, it's a tough.
I don't think it's setting aside partisan loyalties and everything else, I don't think that's a good choice for America. I don't think our country is served well by those being the two candidates on the 2024 ballot. I think we need new faces. I think we need a better sort of leadership. We've had enough of this.
I think a new generation, but I also think it's probably unfair to compare Biden to Trump just because they have similar ages. At least you can say a lot of things about Joe Biden.
Joe Biden's not going to have Nick Fuentes over for dinner, right? Which by the way speaks to the other thing. I remember. I mean, let's get back to the Kanye West Nick Fuentes thing. I remember when Kanye West was wanting to run for president in 2020, and Republicans were all about it because the assumption would be that he would pull probably Democratic voters away from Biden, right, or from the Democratic candidate because he's a groundbreaking hip hop star. That's not my particular. I'm taking this on authority from other people, but that's not my particular genre of music. But my understanding is he's a generational artist and obviously like a fashion designer. I mean, he's bigger than that. I mean, I think his deal with Adidas was like $2 billion is what his fashion line was
married to a Kardashian,
right? So I mean the idea is him being on the ballot was probably going to be more of a drag on the Democratic candidate than the Republican. But what happened when Kanye West started talking about running in 2024? Then this is now post anti-Semite meltdown Kanye West. Now suddenly what are Republicans worried about? That anti-Semite Kanye West is going to pull votes away from Donald Trump. What does that say about the Republican base?
And how about Kanye sitting down with Donald Trump and suggesting that Donald Trump be his running mate, that Donald should be the vice president for Kanye?
That's the only part of the dinner party that I like, that I enjoyed, was Donald Trump. And by the way, that seems to be the only part that Donald Trump got really mad about. Was not that he was sitting down to dinner with this nerdy little troglodyte Nick Fuentes, who says horrible things about, uses the N-word and racial slurs and everything. That didn't upset him. And Kanye West's anti-Semitic meltdown didn't bother him. It was Kanye suggesting that Donald Trump should be the running mate on a ticket and not at the top of the ticket. That's what really did him in. And by the way, sometimes I think because, I mean, we were just laughing about some of this, but consider this for a moment, right? I think one of the problems, this stuff is all very dangerous, right? We have a literal Holocaust denier dining with a former president of the United States, right?
And potentially the Republican nominee in 2024.
That's terrifying. But some of us are laughing about it because roll back the clock 6 months. And what if I told you that Donald Trump was going to have dinner with an anti-Semite and a white nationalist, and it was going to be in the form of a groundbreaking black hip-hop star and some nerdy little twerp with a live stream show, right? I mean, it's like it's dangerous and it's ugly and you have to take it seriously, but I wonder how many people do, because people are also laughing at it. It's so absurd, Chad.
Well, and that's just it. Trump has, you can say a lot of things about Trump, but he's moved the bar dramatically on things that are acceptable. I mean, you think about all the things that he's done that not that long ago, even 10 years ago, would have been the end of any politician.
Senator, I don't know how many people are going to remember this reference, but it's probably 2006. Senator George Allen? Yeah, George Allen for Virginia.
Oh, Macaca.
Said macaca, and it ended his political career. Yep. Right? Because he said macaca, and it was some obscure, I don't even know, was it a slur? I mean, I still don't entirely understand that.
Evidently a racial slur. I wasn't
apparently some obscure thing. He said this one thing off the cuff, ended his political career. Should it have? I don't know. We could have a debate about that. But like, that's the sort of thing that used to end your career, right? Gary Hart had an affair, ended his political, former senator, former presidential candidate Gary Hart, ended his political career, right? Mike Dukakis rode around in the tank with a funny helmet, right? And may have, well, I don't want to say that cost him the election, but boy, it didn't help. Made him look silly. Right?
Although DeSantis has a couple of good pictures right now of him with the boots and that kind of thing.
Looking silly. And the thing is, I don't really want elections to be decided by stuff like that either. Like, I do think it's bigger than that. But just like how high stakes it used to be versus now, where it's like none of it matters. Like,
you think about Trump, Entertainment Tonight, the grabbing women by their private parts, paying off Stormy Daniels, multiple divorces, hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. And that doesn't even get into things that happened since he started the presidency with Ukraine.
Although if we want to talk about hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, there's a laundry list of characters right and left.
I agree 100%. But there was a time where if a president or potential presidential candidate was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, that would have been a big deal. I mean, the fact that Bill Clinton and others did it as well would have been, a big deal if he was still in office. It's just everything has changed in terms of what is acceptable behavior by him. And I still think, some of the rules still apply to other people, but he just gets a pass on. I mean, could you imagine any president before Donald Trump paying off a porn star and still being president?
And so by the way, invited to address the National Prayer Breakfast, still considered by evangelical leaders across the country to be a wonderful choice for president of the United States. The man has literally paid for abortions in his life. I know he has. And by the way, Herschel Walker has literally, we know Herschel Walker has. I'm just guessing with Trump. We know Herschel Walker's paid for abortions. And yet the pro-life people are rallying around him. And what happened?
I mean, I think we got an election on Tuesday with the Georgia Senate race. I think Warnock's going to win, the Democrat. I mean, that's another lost seat that Donald Trump cost the Republicans.
Yeah.
But I don't think that people are going to care that much. And again, we have to see there has to be an alternative on the Republican side. And also, are they going to prosecute Trump at some point for some of these things? And by
the way, what does that prosecution do to the country? Where people are so loyal to him, right? I mean, if you don't care that he's sitting down with Nick Fuentes, you don't care about he's paying off Stormy Daniels, are you going to care that he broke some federal law about classified documents or whatever it is they ultimately end up prosecuting him for? I mean,
right.
Donald Trump famously said he could shoot somebody on Park Avenue and his supporters would still back him. And that, as galling as it is, goodness, boy, that seems true.
And at the time, it was like, oh, look at this egomaniac saying this. And now it's true.
Do you think, last thing, and I don't want this to come off that I'm like blaming the left, but I worry that our rhetoric over the years, we got so comfortable with demonizing everybody that we don't like. And in particular, I want to say, because conservatives, in the news media, conservative points of view are not common. I think a lot of time when you're talking about, especially the national, like the New York Times and a lot of these places, like but for Fox News, a lot of these places lean pretty decidedly left. And they were very casual about writing off a lot of people like Mitt Romney, like George W. Bush, like Dick Cheney, like Paul Ryan, as misogynistic, racist, plutocratic, all the other ugly terms. I worry that we got so comfortable with those condemnations that now people are just sort of inured to them. And so when it's somebody who's actually racist, who is actually guilty of a lot of those things, that the accusations just don't carry weight anymore. Or maybe the right's just become comfortable, like, well, if the left's going to call us this stuff, we'll just become what they accuse us of being.
Well,
And I realize how that comes off. Like, I'm not trying to blame the left for everything that's happening.
What you're saying, but I think as somebody who is left of center, and I think about my feelings about George Bush and Mitt Romney and Dick Cheney and those kind of people, I never envisioned somebody having a national profile of being in power who is to the right of those people, right? I mean, at that point, they were sort of the goalpost in terms of like realistic national figures on the Republican side. And so, I think about things that I've heard people on the left say about George Bush and Dick Cheney, and some of them with the, there might be some truth to some of them, but I think now you talk to most people left of center and they long for the days of George Bush and Mitt Romney being the opposition. I know I do. I mean, the whole purpose of me coming on the show was to sort of show we could have a conversation about things with at least close to a shared set of facts. And I think about what is going on in this country and to a certain extent in this state. There are conservatives that I really like having conversations with. I like talking to you about issues. I like talking to Kelly Armstrong about issues. I mean, there's a lot of people that I disagree with, but we have a shared set of facts. And it feels like often the arguments that we're having right now in this country aren't based from a shared set of facts. They are ideological in nature, and it's just sad. And so, I mean, as we're wrapping up, I mean, again, it's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed this podcast. I hope that someday I can come back again and maybe be a guest. And I'm worried, to be honest, Rob, that you're going to lose the O-band bump moving forward. I had somebody actually asked me yesterday that if the ratings don't go down, does that prove the O-band bump wasn't a real thing? And I said, here's the deal. There's actually no data that backs up the O-band bump. I just kept saying it enough that I had made at least one person believe.
I don't know if people, one of my favorite writers growing up was Hunter S. Thompson, and kind of the Gonzo school. And I don't subscribe to the Gonzo school of journalism the way he did it, but I always thought he was just a brilliant writer and certainly a colorful character. But there's this great documentary about him. And there was a host, like he was covering, I think it was the 1972 or maybe 1968 presidential election. I don't know. But there was a thing that Edmund Muskie, who was a Democratic candidate for president, had an Ibogaine addiction, right? Which is some sort of a drug. Nobody knew about it. And it came out there. And Hunter Thompson was the thing. It was all baloney, but he just started writing about it, right? And like he was writing about a Rolling Stone and all these news organizations were picking it up or whatever. So later on, he was asked about this. He was on some 1970s talk show. I forget what it was, like the Merv Griffin show or something. And he was on there and they asked him about it. And they said, well, what was your source for the Ibogaine addiction. He goes, well, my source was, I heard rumors about it in Milwaukee, and then admitted that he was the one who started the rumors, right? Like he goes, I started rumors about it in Milwaukee. And then like, as everybody's kind of roaring laughing at this admission, he goes, actually, if you listen to me, I'm very accurate, right? I don't know. It was a great anecdote. People should go watch that. Anyway, Chad, it's been a pleasure having you on. I've enjoyed the conversations. What you were seeking out was hoping to have conversations with people you agree that at least, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it is just one side being willing to admit when you get something wrong. Like I got that fact wrong. We don't have to agree, right? I think we have to agree on what the facts are, but I can feel that one fact is more important than a fact that you feel is important. And I can also not immediately feel that your motivations are to destroy me and my way of life, or that you're some evil person twirling your mustache. So anyway, I've really enjoyed having you on. I'm glad to have you on. I'm working on new guest hosts, and we're going to keep chugging, along with the podcast. And certainly you're welcome to come back on anytime.
And I'd really encourage people to continue listening. I don't want listenership to just fall off.
I don't think it's if I get toot my own horn, I don't think it's going to. I've really enjoyed doing this. I think we're going to be just fine.
Thanks, Rob. It's been fun.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.